to show you how to recover from the cold and flu 20 to 30% faster using over 10 strategies of lifestyle, nutrition, and supplements, many of which you've never heard of, in doses that you've never considered, to recover much faster so you can get back to doing what you love. I'm going to show you how you can gain about 70 days of your life back with this ebook, which is downloadable in the bio of my Instagram and the YouTube description here. The average common cold lasts for about 7 days. If we can reduce symptoms by 20%, we can save you about a day per common cold incidence. If you live another 50 years, over 50 years, that's about 50 days, but technically 20% of 7 days is 1.4. So we're going to save you somewhere between 50 and 70 days of your life if you execute what is in this video. We're going to cover mindset, nocebo and placebo. We're going to cover a really impactful, powerful effect of nature bathing on natural killer cells. And then we're going to get into the downsides of non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, the typical approach people take and why it can actually be harmful. And then we're going to get straight into the juice and meat, and we're going to talk you through the supplements that you can take. First of all, the S word. I never say it. It starts with S, I, you can finish the rest. People say they got the cold and flu, and they'll commonly walk around saying, oh, woe is me. And they'll explain all their symptoms to everybody. And this usually makes every person worse. Now, why is this the case? Because of something called the nocebo effect. If you've heard of placebo, it is just the opposite. It's the psychophysiological phenomena where negative expectations lead to negative outcomes and side effects. If you imagine a situation where a group of people are told they were exposed to a virus, even if the individuals haven't actually been exposed, some may begin to experience symptoms because they believe they've been exposed. Our brain is incredibly powerful, and it will create symptoms, a cough, a runny nose, fatigue, even if our body wasn't exposed to an external threat or pathogen. There are numerous studies on the placebo and nocebo effect. We observe this to be true. It's why we believe it so much to be true. It is why we always have a placebo group in scientific clinical trials. So this is an observed reality that no one is denying. Instead, I prefer to deny reality itself. And when, if ever, I experience symptoms of a cold and flu, I don't go out of my way to tell people that I am. Instead, if I absolutely need to communicate, I will tell people a symptom I'm experiencing, or I will say my immune system is being challenged. And there's a very different emotional connotation between versus my immune system is being challenged. I may or may not be experiencing symptoms. You see, you're walking and towing this line because, what are you really looking for? Sympathy? Unless you need something from the other person and you need to clearly communicate to them what you're feeling, because if you don't, they will not be able to give you what you want from a nurturing perspective, if that's what you need. Unless it's those minority of cases, then what do you want? You're not helping yourself by going around, walking around to everybody saying you've got all these symptoms and you're feeling like crap. In fact, we can have a pretty confident guess that's not even a guess, a pretty confident assertion that's probably making you worse. So one thing is your psychology. If you deny reality and just keep living your life and putting these plans in place from a nutrient and supplemental perspective and approach, while adopting a mindset of someone who is strong and adopting a mindset of someone that doesn't believe in things that takes away power and health from them, and if you do that, then you can ward off the risk of the nocebo effect. Before we get into the comprehensive guide, we're going to cover something that we all have access to for $0, and that is nature. As you can see, I'm in it right now. There have been numerous studies on the effects of being in nature and what the Japanese call nature bathing and our immune system. We have observed that being in nature can increase the number of natural killer cells that our body produces. Natural killer cells are responsible for many things, including minimizing tumor growth or cancer growth. And long story short, we suspect that being in nature for consistent prolonged periods of times can have a long-standing effect on our immune system and general health, not even including all the benefits for our cognition. And this also plays into the hormonal system when we talk about cortisol. There are a number of reasons why being in nature reduces cortisol, whether it's also applying to getting more parasympathetic because our eye gaze becomes softened by looking into things in the distance, into the horizon, versus things up close, or whether we're talking about other compounds actually emitted by nature and trees and plants itself. One of them is called phytoncides. Now, these are aromatic volatile compounds that some trees will produce. It's like the tree's essential oils. 1 hour in nature in the woods, and apparently you're supposed to get, according to a study here, a 6-fold increase in circulating pinene levels circulating through your system. Now, we believe that these increase the natural killer cells in our body. This is how the mechanism that we're suspecting. Now, if you stick natural killer cells in a petri dish with some unsuspecting leukemia cells, your natural killer cells can wipe out these cancer cells, but add some different tree essential oils like these phytoncides, and the natural killer cell activity dramatically increases. Now, we're not a petri dish. This is in vivo research. What about in humans? Can we get the same boost? They vaporized some of these compounds into people in a hotel room overnight. They found a significant boost in natural killer cell activity still, but it just boosted their activity rather than the number. And being in the forest, we suspect can actually do both. So maybe a combination of these tree fragrances and walking through the forest can lower cortisol and increase natural killer cell activity. So those are some of the mechanisms that potentially explain why it's happening. We do observe that being in nature reduces cortisol, and we do know cortisol over long periods of time can be quite damaging to the psychology, physiology of the human, including at the level of the gut, damaging the epithelial of the gut, and also contributing to this chronic sympathetic drive that people get elevated heart rate, elevated blood pressure, and you can think of all the downstream consequences for that. So nature appears to be this beautiful, elegant solution to improving our immune system and ability to get sick. So if you're not going to nature consistently, even if you live in a really busy city, every major city has a park or a big central park. So go to those consistently every week and your long-term health will be improved because of it. Here's why taking anti-inflammatories like ibuprofen while you're sick may be counterintuitive. Your body has this fever response to trigger inflammation. An increase in body temperature up to 38.9 degrees or 102 degrees Fahrenheit is generally considered safe. If you go above that, you want to seek a doctor, it can become pretty serious. And I'm quoting a study here. Evidence indicates that people who take medications to reduce fever associated with influenza are 5% more likely to die. Conversely, extremely high fever in the setting of systematic inflammation is harmful. I would say could be harmful. I don't want to speak in black and whites here. Fundamental to the fever response is a short-term accumulation of heat shock proteins, the very same heat shock proteins that you'll see in response to heat stress from things like sauna. And these are proteins that help with lung injury. So this fever mechanism is helpful. It's helpful in fighting infection. So perhaps our innate reaction from what we've grown up to know is not just to reach for non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, but to challenge conventional wisdom and say, hey, we have these chemical messages called prostaglandins. They tell your body to induce fever. They could trigger a pyrogen increase, which triggers a fever response. NSAIDs work by inhibiting arachidonic acid, and that communicates to the prostaglandins to suppress inflammation and fever. So we're suppressing inflammation and fever, but inflammation and fever can actually be helpful to having an antimicrobial effect and destroying the bacteria or virus. Because the onset of sweating, for example, is viewed as a good sign because it indicates the fever has broken. Heat seems to have a productive effect, an antimicrobial even effect, to reducing or minimizing the bacterial or viral buildup in the body. I'm speaking in general terms here. And if that's the case, which we suspect it may be, it probably is, then why are we just reaching out for these non-steroidal anti-inflammatories every time you get a cold and flu or a fever? I'm not saying that these aren't useful. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatories have saved lives. They're very helpful. But I'm saying, okay, context, nuance, maybe you don't need to reach for them every time. Perhaps the fever could even be helpful to help minimizing the long duration of your cold and flu. I don't have evidence for this, but I suspect that a cold and flu or a fever would go longer if it's under 38.9 degrees Celsius, if you're constantly suppressing the fever response, because the fever is helping the person recover quicker. So we may suspect. But I'm not anti-NSAIDs. They're very helpful. Just want to make that clear. Now, here are 9 supplemental strategies. Zinc, and zinc lozenges. Zinc, I will typically take just zinc lozenges because they have an antiviral properties in the throat to minimize throat discomfort. You want to be careful. You want to understand your zinc levels, ideally, before doing this, and your copper levels, because zinc chelates and displaces copper, and you don't want to create a copper deficiency. Now, I don't think you're going to create a copper deficiency. You're probably not going to create one. I'm not going to say I don't think. It's very unlikely you're going to create a copper deficiency based off high-dose zinc for 1 week. But it's just something to be mindful of. We're looking at around 50 to 80 milligrams is what some of the researchers said, and what I have also found empirically. Vitamin C. Vitamin C is much higher than you think. Vitamin C is 8 grams per day. That seems to be the research when they compared 3 grams versus 6 grams versus placebo to minimizing common cold symptoms by at least 21%. You want to split the dosages, 2 grams times 4, because you can quite easily reach the maximal vitamin C blood concentration, and it easily goes down within 24 hours. And to recap that saturation, we have more frequent dosages instead of one high big dose. And this is really a good common sense and common judgment with almost all supplements. Then we have Andrographis, which is a Bioceuticals Armor Force supplement. Take 2 to 4 capsules. That has been shown, it's the Chinese Indian herbal remedy that's been shown to have some effect on respiratory illness and common cold as well. All the resources, or rather the references, are in the last page of the ebook if you want to dive a bit deeper. We have a Trace Minerals Mix by Life Extension if you want to support a more optimal copper-zinc mix together, because it's usually better on the safer side to make sure you take a zinc and copper supplement together, but you could also be really high in copper, and that may be a bad idea. That's why I suggest you guys all work with a health professional coach, whether it's someone like me or just someone you really know and love and trust. We have also, number 5, Bioceuticals Armor Force throat relief. So throat sprays can be quite helpful because they're having targeted effect in the area where there's a lot of viral replication. So that's why nose and throat is quite helpful from when using the sprays. So that can provide some relief and discomfort and reduce some inflammation. And then number 6 is fish oil. Bioceuticals are by far the best brand in Australia for fish oil. There is not a better certificate analysis that I've seen, and that colleagues of mine have also seen, that have told me that they've seen, ever, from a quality perspective. That's what that means, a quality assessment of the fish oil. Most fish oils are pretty low quality. Talking about 2 to 4 grams here, particularly if you don't eat a lot of fatty fish or much fatty fish at all. Fatty fish and omega-3s contained within fatty fish are really good at reducing inflammation. Now, not only want to reduce inflammation, we also want to resolve inflammation at the root of it. And a bit more of a nuanced, complex supplement that most of you wouldn't have heard of, that is a derivative of omega-3s, is specialized pro-resolving mediators. Think of them, as I said, as derivatives of omega-3s, and they have a multitude of compounds in them that don't just try and suppress inflammation, but they really get to the root cause of it. I'm repeating myself here, but just to give you an idea that omega-3s are more of like a suppressive effect of inflammation, and SPMs are more of a root cause. Let's see what the root of it is and resolve the inflammation entirely. I've been using these for my clients with skin issues commonly, and people with really high IgE, which is an inflammatory marker you can get on your blood test, and with pretty good results. We can look at a bioceutical or just a general vitamin D3 and K2 spray. I want to take K2 with vitamin D, pretty important to minimize calcification as a result of vitamin D. With the spray, again, the spray is having an effect at the level of the throat. With the Bioceuticals product, each spray is 1,000 IU. The upper limit for vitamin D is 4,000 IU. However, we empirically and clinically observe vitamin D to be efficacious above much more than that. but I would not recommend you take more than 4,000 IU without looking at blood work and getting a health practitioner to look at your blood work and to understand the general picture of your health. I'm not telling any of you to take any of these supplements. This is health education. With my clients, I would only go above 4,000 IU if they're in a severely deficient vitamin D state or climate really away from the equator, or there are more than that, but those are some nuances to it. But some people have been said to have and observe to take 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 IU of vitamin D during these times of immune system insult, especially during that one pathogen that we came across a few years ago that is still actually around, that no one seems to care about anymore. You remember that one? Yeah, that one, we've seen some studies of very high vitamin D intake with some efficacy. It's mixed. Next is melatonin. I'm not going to get into the mechanism of how melatonin helps, but 3 to 10 milligrams per night, actually particularly we've observed for that other pathogen that I just mentioned, is also helpful. Not only obviously contributing to the onset of sleep, can contribute to immune function interestingly as well. These are 9 supplements in the ebook. Now let me give you a few more here. So we've talked about vitamin D, we've talked about zinc, we've talked about echinacea. Actually, have we talked about echinacea? We know echinacea might reduce the risk and duration of upper respiratory infections. We know that the zinc dosage, let me go back to zinc dosage, is shown to reduce colds between 75 to 95 milligrams per day. And the upper limit for zinc is 40 milligrams. But the reason the upper limit is that is largely because of it chelating copper. You should have no harm if you take up to 100 milligrams per day for up to 2 weeks. But if you start observing symptoms like nausea and vomiting, cramps, obviously, please stop. This is not medical advice. This is health education. Zinc lozenges, like I said, can be really helpful, and that's what I take as well. And one extra supplement for you is garlic. Garlic has a small to moderate improvement in the flu, which is a type of respiratory infection. The cold and flu are different, in case you didn't know. We see some small improvement. And we also, in T cell count, common cold symptoms, upper respiratory tract infection risk, natural killer cell activity, TNF alpha. Okay, these are inflammatory pathways that help contribute to when you are sick. The specific type of garlic is an aged garlic extract. If you have some gut problems, then also allicin has been shown to have some pretty good effects on the gut as well, if you want a 2-for-1 situation there. A note on zinc and having a prophylactic effect, which minimizes the incidence of it happening. If I know I'm going to be around a lot of people, I will take zinc acetate lozenges as a prophylactic to minimize my risk when I'm going into large groups. So you can do that when you're traveling as a little bit of a tip and hack that I do. Let's go back to basics though. Hydration, sleep. Sleep as long as you can, hydrate, making sure you're using minerals and salt in your fluids, half a teaspoon of Celtic sea salt or a similar quality salt in your water to replenish lost minerals, particularly if you're sweating a lot, particularly if you're not eating much. And teas as well, and Gaia Throat Shield, which is a soothing spray as well. So you have all these different options that you can pick from like a throat soothing perspective. You do not have to take all of these supplements. If I'm going to give you a handful, it's going to be zinc, vitamin C, omega-3s, melatonin, pro-resolving mediators, and angiographistin armophores. There you go. I got 6 for you. Okay, but as a priority, if I have to pick 2, I'm doing vitamin C and I'm doing zinc, because you have to remember zinc also helps make neutrophils, and neutrophils are a white blood cell, which are like the first line defenders when your body, and your immune system detects a pathogen and problem. If you want to know more, download the ebook. It's free. And it will have a succinct summary of this. You can pass this video on to, if you want to thank me in any way, pass this video on to someone who gets cold and flus. Wait, that's everybody. So I hope you found it helpful. You can follow Strength of Saad on Instagram if you want to see more. Thank you for watching.